We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here in Utah. You know what that means. It's time for you Cora Whores to get your ass to church. You know we love our Church for Atheists here, the Church of Cora Whore. I have an amazing interview for you guys here today. We have the one, the only, the incomparable Mandisa Thomas from Black Non-Believers Inc. I spaced right at the last minute. And I am just so excited to have her here to talk with us today. You know, we're going to start with our first hymn. We'll be gathering votes in the comments for people who want to hear what your closing hymn will be today. I love to have you guys around. I love to have you here. I'm glad for any of you who wandered over from Mormon discussions. I know that Culch is on tonight. So, but you guys, you know that we got to get our Wednesday service in. Welcome to Wednesday service.
Guide me by morning light, keeping home in my sight. With doubts and dreams take flight. We flash in the dark, so let's flash bright. On a mission to save ourselves, break with dogma with these shelves. My friend, if you choose to be free, I'll light your path if you'll walk with me. We're going home to where we'll find a world where life is worth the climb. One day we will crash and we will die. Oh my friends, that's not tonight. No more shadows in our mind. Leave the fears and past behind. On this pale blue dot, we will make our stand. Light within, we will be your hands. We're going home to where we'll find a world where life is worth the climb. One day by math and science, our path is clear. Strangers once, our re-entry nears. Sighting land, we'll quit this sea. I'm going home, who will come with me?
That is our beautiful hymn, We're Going Home. This is a godless hymn from the Godless Church of Cora Whore. All of you folks who are dialing in from Mandisa Thomas's channels, we're very grateful that she has lent us the use of her channels for this amazing interview. You guys, we have Mandisa Thomas here from Black Non-Believers Inc. Mandisa Thomas is a native of New York City. He's the founder and president of Black Non-Believers Inc. Although never formally indoctrinated into belief, Mandisa was heavily exposed to Christianity, Black nationalism, and Islam. As a child, she loved reading and enjoyed various tales of gods from different cultures, including Greek and Ghanaian. Through reading these stories, she says, and being taught about the cultures at an early age, I quickly noticed that there were similarities and differences between those deities and the God of the Christian Bible. I couldn't help but wonder what made this God so special that he warrants such prevalence today. Mandisa has many media appearances to her credit, including CBS Sunday Morning, CNN, and Playboy. Very nice. The Humanist and Jet magazines. She has been a guest on podcasts such as NPR's Code Switch and 1A, as well as the documentaries God Talk and Contradiction. In 2022, Mandisa was featured on the Atlanta Billboard and newspaper ad for the Freedom from Religion Foundation's I'm Secular and I Vote campaign. She is also a certified humanist celebrant and a member of the Godless Gospel Music Ensemble. So we want to welcome here today our new friend, Mandisa Thomas. Mandisa, how are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It is so good to be here.
Oh, it's so great to finally meet you. I've been following your stuff for a while. Been very interested in your story. You've been at this for how long now? You've been at this for a while.
Black Nonbelievers is now 14 years old. So I've been involved with the overall movement since 2011. And it almost feels surreal, right? It almost feels like, wow, where did the time go? But it has been a while. I have definitely seen this movement through some changes. I have certainly gone through some changes as well, but I'm really, really happy to be here and still grateful that folks are finding us and finding the work that we do and that it has been helpful. So I really do appreciate it.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. I'm curious, in 14 years, they say that really, with the new atheism, there's been this rapid expansion, people deconstructing. Do you find that that's true? Have you seen like a major change in the overall community of people deconstructing and choosing to abandon religion over the course of your career?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. We've actually, I'm proud to say that we have been instrumental in helping people find their voice because, for the longest time, the representatives, especially of non-belief and atheism and humanism in the United States, has been predominantly white men. And not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but it does speak to a lot of the societal stigmas that we all are still dealing with. And so really there have even been a lot of religious people who are now questioning their own beliefs and recognizing that there are aspects of what they believe that are extremely harmful. So I think overall there has been a shift, and we have seen this in the decline of church attendance, like religious church attendance, especially in Christian churches. We've definitely seen this in Pew Research, where now the nuns are among the highest demographic, especially of voters. So, which is very interesting considering the new administration. But we are among now the largest. And I mean, it doesn't mean that everyone is not religious, but people who just don't explicitly identify as like fundamentally religious. That has also changed. We've seen that in studies. We've seen that, in various aspects of research. And so there really has been a shift. There really have been more people who have been definitely deconstructing from those religious beliefs, seeing more content that wasn't available before, and as well as our ability to communicate more quickly through social media, through the internet, and other platforms has also been very helpful. So yes, I will say that there has definitely been a huge shift in a good direction when it comes to people. We've also seen like the backlash of that, right? We're also seeing that now, where people are feeling like, oh my gosh, these people are straying. But as we have access to more information, as we can connect and connect quickly and more efficiently, and people realizing that there is a lot that's wrong with a lot of the indoctrination. There are a lot more people speaking up now, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm just glad to see that people of color are being represented and are being attracted to the movement. I mean, I think that the new atheist movement was really disjointed, disorganized. Nobody was really in charge. We had heroes more than we had leaders, though I love them, but they were also very problematic. Some of our leaders, we love them, we take them, but we also acknowledge, when they're being problematic, right?
Right. And I want to say that, there are organizations that have been around for 50 years plus, like, for example, American Atheists and the American Humans Association. They have been around for a while. And also, I think with every movement that is made up of human beings, there's always going to be there's definitely going to be issues there, right? But I think what can help us as a movement is, like you said, right? We have our heroes, we have our folks who we put on pedestals, and I think that can become an issue at times. It doesn't mean that the work that they do is automatically discredited. However, as human beings, yes, there is an accountability that needs to happen. And I think oftentimes there are so many people who are so used to that religious dynamic that once they leave religion, that indoctrination doesn't leave with them. And so it becomes more than just deconstructing, religion and the God concept. It's also the indoctrination that comes along with it. And recognizing that a lot of things that you may have been conditioned to believe and think are can be harmful. And that, they can be, that they need to be unraveled, right? They need to be reconsidered from a place that just doesn't tell you, well, you do it because I told you so. You do it because, you have the information, or, and also just understanding that, like the church and religious communities have never had the monopoly on community and fellowship. Even if you do something similar, there have always been communities out there, even if we've been conditioned to think that, they're new, right? There's a saying that goes, there's nothing new under the sun. But I think that there are some things that might be newer to us. And yes, it takes some navigating. It takes for folks who, it takes folks to remain dedicated to those changes that we all need to make. And yes, as a movement, it is still very new. It is still we're still learning a lot. And so there's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of bumps and bruises that many of us have gone through. But I really do think that there is still great opportunities for us to learn from mistakes that have been made and really unpack what that means for us and how we can continue to move forward.
I love that. I definitely want to come back on that because I have some very specific questions on that, but I want to make sure it's around there. So I don't know if you've heard of this. I wanted to mention it right off the bat because it's a little bit timely, and I did not prepare you for this. So please just feel free to tell me, Joe, don't spring weird things on me last minute.
It's no problem.
Have you heard of this, that Rupert Murdoch at Fox News has purchased Tubi, and there's some conversation with the streaming? Okay, you've heard of this.
I mean, I don't think I've heard of it, specifically, but it doesn't surprise me. But please continue.
Okay.
Please continue.
I happened to catch a few. Actually, one of them was a religious service. It seemed like a pastor who was talking, a black pastor, and it's been talked about by some black influencers. I wish I could remember off the top of my brain who. This was like late night Saturday. I saw this, but they're talking about how basically this is an outreach on Fox News program to basically, without Fox News programming, start targeting outreach to Black Americans, and it's like, oh wow, trying to catch a new demographic by just sneaking it in there. But the thing is that in the process, they purchased also and merged into Tubi and their Tubi streaming network, this Red Seat Media, I think it's called, which is basically Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, and basically all these people who got shit can, frankly, from Fox News, and now they're all back underneath the umbrella, right, fresh off of the Russia financing scandal with Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and all them. After they'd gone out and apologized for all these people saying, we don't know how they got mixed up with Russian money, we don't know anything about, and then they all got brought back under Rupert Murdoch's tent. It's like, that doesn't feel great, guys. That's not a great look. But do you think, I mean, doesn't it seem sometimes now that there is this attempt to try and, from, say, socially conservative America, to recapture, to outreach, especially those Black Americans who are straying away from the church paradigm, the traditional conservative family values paradigm, and shifting to a new one, that it does seem like there's something almost infantilizing. Is that the word? I mean, it's like, how long did they think they could get away with it before people would notice, right?
So there is a, it is unfortunate that, usually like religion and like churches have had to adapt over time. They've had to adapt their messaging. Like there was a time, especially I will say in Black communities, right, that like gospel music was definitely more traditional. It was, you're singing in like the not necessarily storefront churches, but it was, your typical, music. And that's not to say that gospel does not have its own rich history. I mean, I'm not really a gospel fan, even though I am a member of Godless Gospel, but, which is fantastic. Shout out to the Freedom from Religion Foundation. But if you notice that gospel music, it went through a shift. So now there are a lot more like gospel rappers, it wedged itself where it kind of got its tentacles into like hip hop and more popular musical genres to try to, refine their message to the younger people and making it more relatable to people. I think that, religion and many churches have definitely done that over the years to where they've had to adapt, because after a while, the fire and brimstone, that didn't work for everybody anymore. People were like, wait a minute, we're seeing all these things going on in the world. This is not cutting it. So now how do we create a softer message? How do we get more people to come back, right? It's marketing, right?
Yeah. Right.
They had to take a business approach to their messaging. And we've seen this, and we see this in a lot of contemporary Christian music as well, right? We see a lot of, I've definitely seen a lot of religious leaders and musicians and artists kind of graft themselves toward what is popular and try to make it their own, right? Or make it more palatable for their message and incorporate pop culture into their messaging. And I think that unfortunately, because there are still people who are looking to fulfill that, that community and that sense of belonging, and then especially in times of crisis. I think it's very, and I'm sorry not to kind of, I'm not blanking here, but I think it's definitely a part of, I'm not sure if they think that people are dumb, but I know that there are a lot of people who are influenced by what they see in mainstream, or what they see in social media, or what they see on TV. And I think that they may be trying to follow those trends for sure. And they are not lost on these executives. Now, I remember Tubi Tubi has a lot of, older movies, older programs, and they also have some independent Black films that are on that network. And so it's becoming more popular now.
Mhm.
And so that is being noticed by these executives who are like, how can how can we get our messaging across to people who might be, gravitate? How can we pull them back in? It is a form of business, but it's also almost kind of, I would think that it is kind of catering to people's vulnerability and also people's short memories. Because remember, I know you remember the 80s and early 90s with Jimmy Swaggart, right? And
Oh,
Jim
sure.
Baker, the televangelists who were telling people how to live their lives, and then they got caught up in these scandals. But then the people still love, Jim Baker still has a ministry. I think even Jimmy Swaggart may still have a ministry.
Yeah.
But
Greg Popoff.
yeah, yes. And so for all these people who have been exposed for their hypocrisy, the ability to still rebrand after that is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And I really do. It's unfortunate that you have these networks that are partnering with these, with these religious leaning and these conservative leaning networks that are just as hypocritical and just as but I certainly hope that the Tucker Carlsons of the world and Megyn Kelly's who have been so outright and blatantly racist, blatantly elitist, blatantly classist. Are they expecting people to just simply forget that because they're like, oh, we just turned over a new leaf, right? Are they trying to imply that Black folks are dumb or that other folks are dumb? I hope that doesn't work. But because religion does still play a huge role in Black communities, even to the point where it is still in our entertainment, they're looking at that possibility. And so I just hope that people don't fall for it.
Yeah, I agree. You bring up an interesting point here because, as I was saying before about new atheism, right? Really, you're really talking about three characters and Daniel Dennett. As I said, I actually talked about this in my Godless sermon on Sunday. I'm like, you had three people, and then there was going to be Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and that didn't work out. Now, in retrospect, that's probably a good thing. But you had three leaders, and then you had Daniel Dennett. Who is was very welcome. May he rest in reason.
Yes.
Right. But then you have these three white men, very well educated men of privilege, but intelligent, brilliant men. Each one of them a little problematic in his own way, in a lot of the same ways. But we still celebrate them, which is what's interesting to me. Because we have this boycott system of activism that exists in America and in the world really, and but we kind of have had to, because these leaders just emerged naturally. It feels to me like we kind of have to take them as a mixed bag and say, look, nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to have some problematic nature. You don't have to cancel them right off the bat. Canceling does happen, and I think that sometimes it has to happen. I don't know how you feel about that. Like, do you think that there's a system that works for that? Does canceling work? And is atheism different in the way that we're doing that?
So I do think that there's levels, right? And there's layers to all of it. And as someone who has had a cancel call, like from my head, previously, I know what that feels like. I won't really get into that here, because I will say that people have seen and I show that I have proven, my work in this community and my dedication and my passion, even through any mistakes or any flaws that I have. I think, having, calling to those individuals, right? Two of them in particular, who have in their respective fields are very, should be very accredited and lauded. It is when they have spoken on things that they really had no business speaking on, and they should have deferred to other experts. They should have referred to other, subject matter experts when it comes to things that were out of their level, out of their understanding. And I do think that it is a privilege at times to be able to speak to something as a degreed person who has such fanfare that at times, if you are unfamiliar with the subject and you are not going to do the research on it, to just shut the fuck up. And I think that there have been some folks who have platformed folks in bad faith, so to speak. And for those of us who are coming from communities who have been institutionally disfranchised, to dismiss the fact that there has been scientific racism. We cannot deny this. This is historically factual. There was a time that even through the fields of science and how they have advanced, there have been practitioners who have been racist and who have come up with ideas that have been very, very harmful. And it doesn't make us less than to acknowledge that. But when you platform people who actually say that there's a basis for it, and when you actually try to deny folks' humanity, especially in their identities, and you do it consistently, you do it in a way that is extremely problematic and in ways that you undermine your credibility, because you are denying people their dignity and their humanity. That becomes a problem. And then that does deserve some sense of, okay, well, we're going to have to dial this back. There does need to be some accountability there. And it's not, again, if it's just, oh, well, this person said one thing one time, or they may have said it years ago, they may have changed now, we should just cancel them for what they said years ago. And even though they've changed, I think that is absolutely unrealistic and it's unreasonable. However, if someone who is very public facing continues to show to display very problematic dispositions as well as behavior, even after these things have been called to their attention, but they continue to ignore it, then there does need to be some action taken. And there does need to be, okay, well, there should be some consideration of, okay, well, at this time, this person was very helpful in my transition, but about now, they are leaning in ways that are not progressive, that may need to be called out. And I do think that it is important for us to continue to maintain our principles of evidence, skepticism, critical thought, but also compassion, right? Understanding and being empathetic of each other, realizing that education and information learning is going to be lifelong. And even if you are a person who has academic credentials, you are not exempt from learning and improving. And it's going to be important that we allow us as human beings to be able to have that level of understanding and room for compassion, but not to the point where we are deifying them and just getting so defensive of them to the point where if they are showing continuous harm and continuously disregarding folks who, especially the folks, the voices who have not been heard previously, that definitely is an issue, and it is a concern and should be addressed and resolved. So I think that it is important that they don't get to gatekeep who represents our community, and also be open to understanding the institutional oppression, how these people of privilege have benefited off of the backs of those who have been further oppressed. And you don't just get to dismiss that. You don't just get to dismiss it to say, well, I may not be outwardly, and they may very well mean well, but subconsciously and systemically, they may still be causing harm. And so to address it doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to take them down, but when you are intentionally, fighting back against that, then yes, that does become an issue. And we've seen that in some of like the four horsemen that you have referenced. And I think it is important that if we are looking for, we should be actively looking to support and amplify and better platform those who are diversifying and bringing more nuance to this movement. It's going to take intentional seeking them out, making sure that there is a level playing field, if you will. And if there is bad information, being presented as a community, we have the opportunity to help correct each other in that and become better. And for those who are willing to be flexible and to take that step back to say and be willing to admit, okay, well, I was wrong, I stand corrected. Then great. For those who will not do that, then there should be we should reconsider how they are being platformed. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I agree. It's interesting as you're saying that. I'm thinking about that we get a lot of criticism about the so-called new atheists and like the Four Horsemen, and so I'll be known to go off on a rant once about people forget how brilliant Hitch was. He really was brilliant, and he could speak so well, and he was so eloquent, and blah blah. And then somebody will bring up to you, aren't you the same guy who harps on about feminism and intersectionality, and Hitch was not great about that. I was like, well, no, he downright sucked about feminism. But I have to look at it, and I'm like, I say, you know what though? One of my favorite picket signs, and it's not one. You'll see it at every protest that atheists and agnostics, free thinkers, you'll see it again and again, is this picket sign that says, my ideas change with new information. My beliefs change with new information. And it's like, that is our clarion call, not Hitch, not Dawkins, not Sam Harris even. And it was, I told people, I said, look, I love me some Sam Harris so much, but his comments after the November election just broke my goddamn heart. I'm like, oh, Sam, don't do this to us, buddy. Not now. Don't do this now.
I know Sam Harris had the author of The Bell Curve. I think.
Yes, he did.
Don't remember his name. I think his name might have been Charles Russell or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But he was platforming him as like a free speech sort of thing, and it was like, well, are you challenging him on that? How did that conversation? And from what I understand, it did not go well. And it was just like it was these two white guys speaking to race and race matters, and they did not have folks who were subject matter experts to weigh in on that. And that is irresponsible. That is an irresponsible thing to do, because there are plenty of Black scholars and historians and folks who could speak to that. And when people are in their bubble and they don't, and they don't look outside to have a balanced perspective on that becomes extremely problematic. And to just simply defend that because of the status that people like that may hold, it can be very, very that becomes a challenge for those of us who, like you said, our beliefs or our perspectives should change with new information. We should be considering it at the very least. But if we know that historically, and there are a lot of things that people don't know, right? There are still, even like in a month like Black History Month, there are a lot of people who still didn't know what Juneteenth was, the significance behind it. There are still people who think that critical race theory is, people just trying to get white folks to hate themselves. And we've seen this. I've seen my colleagues in the secular movement espouse this incorrectly. And and they're spewing right-wing talking points about this when that is not the case. So we are not exempt from having our blind spots as a community. However, as we pride ourselves on being evidence-based, being critical thinkers, it is important that we allow ourselves to continue to exercise some vulnerability and say, you know what, I didn't know this before, I was mistaken. And unfortunately, there are still a lot of people who are not, still aren't willing to do that. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we allow people, especially who are more public facing, to continue to double down on the things that they say that aren't correct and that can be harmful to other people. And so I think that it is important that we are honest about like for those who, like Dr. King, for example, right? Very, very, great leader. And I think there are a lot of layers to Dr. King that people really they really don't know, like about his humanism and how he was very pluralistic as a religious leader. But he definitely had his flaws. He was a serial philanderer, almost unapologetically, which, if we want to take a look at that, why are we shaming sexuality anyway, right? But that's a whole other conversation. But he was certainly a human being who had flaws, and it does not take away from his legacy simply because we recognize those flaws in people, and perhaps there were things that he probably should not have done, or maybe should not have been so susceptible to, and we can say that for a lot of people who we hold near and dear. But I think that when we start simply becoming so defensive to the point where, especially those who are still living, it is important that we are able to, and also that those individuals are able to at least work through, because I don't think that any human being is exempt from projecting some personal issue. None of us are exempt from that. And I think that the more we recognize that as human beings, then we can go a whole lot further in our engagement.
Yeah. I think, that's curious what you're saying there. So as I'm hearing you, I'm hearing that yes, canceling can be effective and necessary, but perhaps it's important to bear in mind that representation is more important. So maybe less about diminishing the people who are problematic than about bringing in people who have fresh perspectives and can get things like intersectionality. Because I really feel like that's the difference between so-called atheism plus the new atheism movement versus the new atheists, quote unquote. I still say new atheists weren't really a thing. It was just always atheism, and atheism plus is the same. But it's just that you have a lot of younger voices who get intersectionality, and and as they rise, or we rise, the voices that were, regressive about feminism are going to diminish. And that's just completely, it's a natural evolution. It's just going to happen.
Ultimately, they will cancel themselves. And I think that this is true for all movements, right? Because I always say that it is impossible to, unfortunately, we are seeing in this administration someone who has basically gotten away with murder, so to speak, and there is no accountability there, and it is so disheartening to see. But I do think that ultimately, when you are navigating community spaces, those who are truly dedicated to the work, who are truly dedicated to the whether it is in academia, whether it is in community engagement, we're, no matter what it is that that is important to you. And there could be multiple things, right? Ultimately, those who refuse to adapt and understand that with new information and comes new ways of understanding and engaging, especially those who have been marginalized. So the movement is going to grow and bring in people who have been traditionally, like oppressed. And it is important that we incorporate. I mean, they intersect, right? We've been talking about the intersectionality of what it means to be atheist and non-religious, what it means to be Black, a person of color, a woman, LGBTQ person. All of these things matter, and they are all interlinked. They are all, we are, and it doesn't do us any, as a matter of fact, we do a disservice by not acknowledging that our community and the work we do does impact those communities, and we should be we should be the ones leading the charge on that. And so yes, I do think that it is important for, and perhaps because, and this also goes into because for me, just simply debating and fighting with religious people gets exhausting, right?
Yeah.
Certainly there does need to be, though, we do need to have those conversations and also be speaking out against how we're seeing especially Christian nationalism be infused into public policy and how that harms all of us. But yes, supporting and platforming the people who have been doing work and who have been in the trenches and who do not necessarily get the support or the recognition and the visibility that they deserve, I think is definitely important. Helping to amplify and raise those voices more at the end of the day is definitely will be I think we have a tendency, and it's easy for us to kind of really get caught up in being so angry to the point where we don't figure out how do we move forward from this. And that's not to say that it doesn't happen, because it does. But yes, I do think that at the end of the day, platforming and supporting those who are engaged fully in the work is going to be more important than who we are simply trying to just get rid of, because eventually, as people navigate, then hopefully they are staying away from those types of people. And it doesn't mean that it's going to happen overnight. It will take time, but consistency and being persistent is very, very important here.
I believe it. And it's really, it feels to me while you're saying that, I'm thinking about it really does feel like the moment of the Gen X time for us, is the Gen X generation is stepping up to the plate to be the leaders. For example, as you're talking, one of our luminaries is on YouTube, Jules Treasures, who is a YouTube creator and trans woman. She has really taken a real leadership position in the Church of Korihor and in this godless church and godless movement that we're doing. And I know that you have, in Black non-believers, is primarily led by women of color, including LGBTQIA+.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. I hate to take any credit like this, Mandisa, but we really are leading this. We're at the front end of this, right?
Absolutely, and we still face an uphill battle. We still face an uphill battle of dealing with patriarchy and also racism, sexism. And the one thing I've always, I did a talk on white supremacy a couple of years ago. It made some people mad, but whatever, right? So the one thing I say is that, when it comes to institutions and how people think, you don't necessarily have to be physically shackled or physically held down to be, to be reinforcing harmful ideals, because sometimes it is so baked into the fabric of how we live, and it tends to be subliminal at times. And so ultimately, many of us can be guilty of reinforcing these ideals without even realizing it. Which means that it makes it harder for trans people. And we're seeing this now in public policy. We are seeing the erosion of trans rights. We've seen the erosion of reproductive health and reproductive rights. We are seeing the erosion of racial justice. And there are some people who don't realize that they are helping to support things that are not in their best interest. And sometimes we still fall into these traps of who we see as being the representatives for us, which makes it harder for women and LGBTQ-led organizations and that have leadership in them to get the support that we need, to gain the traction that we to get that, because there are just some people who are still so used to a certain aesthetic of what it means to be a leader and who should be supported. And that is something that all of us will need to unpack. And I think I think it's wonderful. And that has been a part of our mission since the beginning. That we welcome all, and that we are very empowering of the LGBTQ plus community, especially within Black spaces. Because that is something that the Black community still needs to contend with, whether we like it or not. And that the overall community, when it comes to the representation of and who gets the proper recognition and support that is needed, these are things that we are still struggling against, but we do the work anyway, right? I think Black folks have always had to work with. We've always had a harder fight with less resources, but we did it anyway. But that just goes to show the resilience and the fact that oppressed people will not stand to be oppressed for long. Throughout the history of resistance movements, even before the civil rights movement, even throughout history, oppressed people will rise up, and people who have been subjugated will rise up. And it is important for us, especially now that we're seeing a new wave of laws and policies being stricken, to continue to really just unpack the subtle, the subtle aggressions that we may have, and just really recognize how we can change that and continue to support each other in ways that are very tangible at the end of the day. It is going to be important more than ever for us to continue to move forward with our missions and be affirming and empowering of the marginalized demographics that we represent unapologetically.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tell you, we were talking, in fact, a little bit before the show. This is a surprise to most people. Most people of color I've talked to about this, and I ask them, have you heard of this? And the answer is no. And what the hell are you talking about? That's disturbing. But back in 2020, back in 2019, at the NAACP convention, they invited President Russell M. Nelson of the Mormon Church to come and speak. And Reverend Amos C. Brown, famously, he's been an activist. I mean, he's been an activist since he grew up with Medgar Evers, frankly. And, he's been part of this movement the whole time. He's famous now for being the pastor for Kamala Harris in California. But and he's also somewhat famous for having done some problematic things and preached some problematic things from his church. And, he introduced the president of the Mormon Church. I hope I don't have to explain to anybody out there how problematic the relationship with the Mormon Church and the Black community has been. And but he throws his arms around him and calls him my brother from another mother. And I'm sitting here going, oh no. I mean, if they break out into John Brown's body right now, I just don't know what I'll do. I'll lose my shit. And it's like, I can't help but look at it and say, and ultimately what they did is they wound up putting together a scholarship fund for like $250,000 and then sending a couple $1 million a year to Ghana. And it's like, okay, it's like not even helping the community that you have marginalized for 200 years of Mormon history. But nonetheless, it turned out to a photo op of pictures of Reverend Brown with his arms around the Mormon prophet, this tall white man who's now 100 years old, going on 101. And I'm like looking at it, I'm going like, it's like the old men decided to put race aside for a minute, but then come together and embrace ideas that old men hold. And it's like, good for them for putting race aside. I don't know how racist Russell M. Nelson himself was or is, or frankly, Reverend Brown. I'm not going to say, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, since then in the Mormon apologist community, they show those pictures all the time. Oh, here's President Nelson with the NAACP and the UNCF. It's like, who are there at this meeting they did in 2020 where they announced these scholarships. And I'm like, okay, that does not undo 200 years of segregation, marginalization, and silencing of Black voices, and frankly, acting against Black bodies. And it's like this, that doesn't just go away because you say, well, no, I don't, and so I'm like, looking at this, I'm like, I can't help but wonder, this is where my question is to you. Mm-hmm. I know how we in the ex-Mormon community feel about it. Like we're calling it out, but we are a predominantly white, and or Latinx group primarily. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here going, I can only imagine how people of color must feel about the NAACP right now. Is there frustration with decisions that are being made at the NAACP or at other institutions, these other traditional institutions that are frankly being run by the same generation they were, 30, 40 years ago for the most part?
So this reminds me of a conversation that I had on the first March for Women after the first, during the first Trump administration. I happened to be, I was tabling on behalf of BN at a joint event. And I actually had a conversation with the local president of the NAACP in Atlanta. So he asked about, my organization and what we stand for. And, I gave him a bit of history about the NAACP and how one of the founders was W.E.B. Du Bois, who was, Harvard graduate, was involved and was a strong critic of the church, very much a free thinker. And when I said that, he admitted that he didn't really know much about W.E.B. Du Bois at the time, and that he was learning about him, and that he actually petitioned for the local NAACP to stop doing prayer at the beginning of their services because it was turning people off, because they realized that everyone who was involved with the NAACP was not a Christian. However, it has seemed to sort of de facto branded itself as a Christian organization because there are so many Christians involved with it. So a lot of these a lot of these pastors tend to, infuse themselves and they infuse their beliefs into this organization, which is really not supposed to be religious at all. It's supposed to be about the advancement of colored people, and regardless of their religious or non-religious background. But unfortunately, it has been allowed to be saturated with with a lot of religious representation. There has been some pushback about that, but clearly it hasn't been enough. And I know a lot of people love to see philanthropic measures, right? And when you say that it doesn't, you're absolutely right that it does not erase, just because these people came together to put together the scholarship for organizations overseas, or for countries overseas, which there's no telling if they're also forcing their beliefs on them, because usually that's what it comes with. It comes with that caveat that you have to accept the belief that comes along with it. It also does not. It doesn't negate the fight for economic reparations in this country, which so many people are still against. So many people. It does not erase, yes, the fact that there have been Black folks and other folks who were effectively disfranchised legally in this country. The many people who died, the many people who lost homes and property, and the fact that this country was built on slave labor, and that folks have still never been properly compensated for that. And yes, I will say for the record, I am a proponent of economic reparations. And our organization as a whole does advocate for economic justice. But I wonder how people in those communities feel, because for the longest time there were a lot of white churches that and like you said, the Mormon church has a history of discriminating and keeping Black people out and other people of color. But of course now, and I think we talked about this. We talked about this earlier about the messaging, right? Sometimes the messaging changes. Because now they're like, oh, well, we're more welcoming, because there's been a lot of bad press about the Mormon church, especially the more fundamental sects of denominations of Mormonism, the ones who the old men are marrying the young girls, and like the Warren Jeffs of the world, who and others like him, who were basically abusing these young girls. So they've had to rebrand their messaging. And so of course, what a good PR move to say, hey, we're going to offer this money and partner on a scholarship with the NAACP, which does back a lot of scholarships for Black college, for Black students. But oftentimes, even the United Negro College Fund, and I think there is something to be said about a lot of historically Black colleges and universities being started by churches, right? I think it's important for us to understand the history and acknowledge the history of it, but it doesn't have to define it. And those who are non-religious should not have to hide our identities. And unfortunately, we have to, because of the pervasiveness of religion and the expectation. It's like, oh, well, we can come together, as I guess brothers in Christ or what have you. But it's like, wait a minute, that I have to wonder. I know how it looks to people like us, right? Who've come out of it, or who look at it like, there have been many racist ideologies that have come from out of Christianity in particular. And so we're looking at it like, we're definitely giving it the side eye. But I have to wonder how the people within those organizations are taking it, and whether there is any sufficient pushback enough to the point where they're able to, stop things like this from happening. And the more, I think people need to realize that especially because I think most people in the NAACP are dues-paying members. So they need to realize that they do have the power and the ability to help make those changes if they see that something isn't right, and not just simply be swayed by these big sweeping PR moves, just simply because we like to see philanthropic actions and measures. Like, don't let them pull the wool over your eyes. But how we get people to, and this is probably a long end run around like the question, right? But just and I think that has been a struggle with organizations like the NAACP, which is probably why you see so many other organizations sprouting up. because they're
Yeah.
tired of that old guard and that old way of thinking. And I mean, it doesn't mean that it can't be changed from within, because it should, but also understanding that its foundations were not rooted simply in religion.
Yeah.
Like the main founder was someone who was a secularist. And I think that people probably should be reminded of that every chance they get.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even a lot of people who have made, and especially people of color who have made a lot of strides forward for secularism, we're not strictly self identified atheists or self identified agnostics in a time, frankly, when that wouldn't have been as well received as it is now.
Correct.
But I mean, you've talked about Frederick Douglass and James Baldwin. I mean, the fact that more people don't understand the amazing contribution that James Baldwin made. It's like, this is a beautiful Black man who really did a lot for not only people of color, but for everyone, not
And
just
who was
fighting for civil.
gay. And who was
Yeah.
gay. And we look at Lorraine Hansberry, who famously wrote A Raisin in the Sun. And how the character Beneath Younger was an atheist. It was based on her. It was based on her and her life, that she basically wrote herself into that piece of work. And it's really at times it is sometimes it can be very disheartening and very frustrating that to see that there are folks who still don't know this information. And there's only so far that our education, I mean, there's a lot to be said about the public school system, or any education system, even private schools. You can't teach everything all at once, but and that's why I said education is lifelong. But there are still fundamental facts about, especially those historic figures, that should be taught. And especially like for James Baldwin, who famously said that if the God that you serve is not a loving one, it's time to get rid of him. I'm paraphrasing, right? But
Right.
people tend to overlook that part.
Yeah.
They do. And I think it's important that people, there have always been Black folks who have challenged and critiqued religion. Some who may have been atheists, but that wasn't a main part of their identity. Although Butterfly McQueen, who was famously in Gone with the Wind, said she was an atheist. And one of her famous quotes is, "As my ancestors are free from slavery, I am free from the slavery known as religion." There are a lot of people who tend to not remember that about her. And I think unfortunately, towards the end of her life, she was, she was not a wealthy woman. And it was such a shame that she passed away under such meager circumstances. But I really think that her legacy and that does need to be amplified a lot more. I know the Freedom from Religion does hold that up in her legacy. I know we do here at Black Nonbelievers as well. But these are still very little known facts about folks who we know in history who did express their criticism of religion, especially in communities of color. And it's going to take a concerted effort on all of our parts to really just amplify that more. So it's just there are just there's so many layers that we probably will not be able to touch on in one episode, but hopefully it's a start.
Sure. Well, and I think that the long game is really one about passing the mic. And I look to it, and I'm seeing comments on your channel, some amazing comments from people saying how proud they are to be a proud, atheist woman of color, and things like this. It's like this is our time. It's like I said in my first sermon, we're going home. I looked right into the camera and I said, "This is our time." I hope people out there really get it, and so. Do you think that there's something we can do? What can we do to pass the mic more to people who are in this first generation, where you can come out as a person of color who says, I am godless, and it's great, and we're building something beautiful and good here. What can we do to pass that mic better?
Yes. So first and foremost, people of color who are coming into your community need to know that they are valued, and that they are not just that their experiences and that the perspectives that they bring are not simply being dismissed, and not just doing this whole, well, you know, we're all one, you know, we should just, you know, forget about the differences, or, you know, this, I don't see race, I don't see color. That is one of the worst things that anyone can do. Right.
That's
you
right.
know, well, why does, you know, and we get this all the time. Right.
Right.
You know, how, and we also get asked the question of how, we also ask a lot about how can communities be more inclusive, and it really, I wouldn't say it's not rocket science, because it isn't. Right. You know, and continue to incorporate multiple voices, and also go into communities that you might not necessarily always, you know, be traditionally accustomed to going into, and don't be, you know, I would say, don't be afraid of talking to people whom you may not have known before. You know, just try to have conversations, even if they are, you know, even if they may be contentious. Engage with folks who have, you know, the same values, and incorporate them into your leadership. Like you said, there's a trans woman, a trans person who is in your leadership, and LGBTQ folks, and folks who can bring not just a representation of how you look diverse, but diversity in what you do. There are many of us who still like to do, you know, there are still folks who, like you said, they miss the church, right? They miss the church aspect. And so incorporating aspects of that into what you do, but in ways that are more, I think that I would say that humanist, you know, like humanist principles and values are more meaningful. Incorporating that into practice is definitely going to be important. And also, I always say, put your money where your mouth is, right? You know, if there are organizations led by women, led by people of color, and they align with your values, bring them in as guest speakers. Encourage people to support their work. You know, you can do more than one thing at one time. Like, let's say if you are a person who regularly gives like $10 to one organization. If there is a guest or an organization that is being platformed, perhaps take $5 of those dollars and share and give it to another organization, or maybe just a few dollars. Just divert a few of them, and it doesn't take much. You know, support more than one initiative, especially if they are grassroots organizations and folks that are in organizations that are doing significant work that are uplifting marginalized people. Give those platforms to those who and if you have the ability to do that, definitely, and encourage people in your network to support them however they can, and do so by taking themselves out of it, right? You know, because there is a tendency for people to become defensive when we speak about institutional aspects and what collective and what people have done collectively, right? They tend to say, well, I didn't do it. You know, well, nobody's saying you did it. And nobody's saying that you are doing things intentionally, but what we are asking for people to do is recognize that these things have been harmful, how they have impacted all of us, and also listen to the people who tell you what you can do to actually make substantive changes. And a huge part of that is, again, continuing and being consistent with your engagement of these community members, of these community leaders, looking for partnership opportunities, ways that you can continue to work together, on as much as possible, in on initiatives, and just and just really showing people that you are able to listen. You show that you care, and that you are, sometimes one of the hardest things is to, I wouldn't say humble oneself, but to always be, always be available to communicate and respond to people, and that sometimes that's going to be, harder, especially for those of us who are wearing multiple hats. But it is, as a community of folk, if you regularly get together and you have guest speakers, definitely look for organizations and people who align with your values, and see how you can support them, because more often than not, we share a lot of the same struggles, a lot of the same challenges, and there are ways that we can learn from each other, share best practices, and ways to improve on the things that we do. Just regularly, we can always learn from each other and incorporate practices that help us grow.
I love that because it's just, as you're saying that, it's like I'm hearing that there may be a fine line sometimes between promoting visibility and representation versus tokenizing, and that's
Right.
kind of the sin from our side, if you, whatever you want to call that, progressive, liberal, whatever it is, woke, whatever kind of language people want to use. By looking at it, and I'm like, the difference is, it really comes down to, are you living the value, or are you just are you using it as an excuse? It's like, see, we have Black people. It's like, wait a minute, retract. That's not it. Do you have the value published where people can see it? This is the value. Like, one of the 12 values of Corohorism is BIPOC advocacy. And I look at it, and every time I see that, and I look at it and I say, we've published it, we say it, but what are we doing about it?
Right.
And that's where I'm like, shit, man, that's a good point. That's a good point. And it's like, I say, I could come up with something. I could say, well, we're going to start doing this. We're going to start doing these activities to do more outreach, or we're going to do these activities, but they would all be a arguably white man. I consider myself Latinx, but I could be either. But arguably a white man coming up with ideas. And it's like, that's already wrong. It's got to be, talk to a person of color, especially a woman of color, find out what can we do, learn from that, take it, and then say, remember, the Mandisa told us this. This
right.
is
and do not just simply put the weight of that work on that person of color or on that woman. It needs to be collective. If there are help pick up that torch, because when I tell you that there have been Black women over the years, like I said, in these streets, as we say, doing this work, it is going to be incumbent upon those of us who consider themselves allies to continue to reevaluate how they react to things, also how they are helping to live those values, and also how they are helping to absorb and make that more light work for all of us. What do we say? Helping hands, more helping hands make light work. So I think that is going to be very, very important to exercise at the most of all, that we are living our values through what we do, and not just saying, hey, look at what we did, we're better people, right? And there is a way. That doesn't mean that. I think it's good to give credit where it's due, and for the people who deserve it. But yes, one of the things that's very important is that it is not just simply on the weight of those who are marginalized to educate people, to always simply tell you what it is that you should do. If you are, and yes, I think, but at the same time, I think amplifying our voices and also giving me space to tell people what it is that they should do, and like I said, incorporate it and support the work that is being done in substantive ways is going to be extremely, extremely important there.
I love that. To wit of that, there is an event, a revival of reason that you're currently organizing. Is that right?
That is correct. Next month, from March 21st to the 23rd, Black Nonbelievers. We've hosted quite a few monumental events over the years. We were co-producers of the Women of Color Beyond Belief conference from 2019 to 2022, skipping, of course, 2020, due to the pandemic. We host our annual BNC Con, which you see behind me there. And so we are hosting a Revival of Reason in March in the Atlanta area, but it is hybrid. You can register to view online, and we will be featuring a number of speakers, presenters, entertainers. Shelley Siegel, if you're familiar with her, she is originally from Australia. She is an atheist artist. She is fantastic. I just love her to pieces. She's going to be one of our performers. We will be doing a rendition of Godless Gospel there. We will be hosting a cookout. We're going to have a spades tournament, and we're going to have a homecoming ball. It's going to be the entire weekend. Includes the sessions. There's going to be refreshments there. And so we definitely want folks to come out. If you have never experienced a Black Nonbelievers event, we definitely want you to experience that. And our keynote speaker is going to be Nigerian activist Mubarak Bala. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mubarak, he is a Nigerian activist who, at the time of his role as president of the Humanist Association of Nigeria, was abducted and eventually charged with blasphemy for a Facebook post. He was abducted. He had no contact with his family, acquaintances, or anyone, and he was eventually sentenced to almost 40 years in prison. For blasphemy, but ultimately that sentence was overturned. He was freed, and there was a global outcry for his release. And so we had the opportunity to feature him on our live stream show, and he will be giving a keynote address at our Revival of Reason. And I think it's important for people to understand that there are still folks who speak out and engage in this work, even though it is dangerous, even though they can be imprisoned, even though they can lose their lives for doing so. And, and it is more, I think it is more vulnerable, especially for people of color, especially those who are from African descent, because of the challenges, the institutional challenges that we face, and in some countries, the laws that are on the books for being openly non-religious. In the United States, we can face ostracism, but that's how we build communities. And there are communities that are being built. There are networks that are being built, even though it is dangerous to do so. And so we are highlighting and celebrating those who are doing so. And we are also, there will be workshops on how to prepare for light end of life, how you can engage in community services as a non-believer. Like I said, I'm a humanist celebrant, which means I've performed weddings. I have done memorials for non-religious people. And so there are resources available for those who are continuously engaging in non-religious community. And so we want people to know what is available for them, which resources, how they can get involved in activism, how they can become more engaged, how they can volunteer, how they can support our organization as well as other organizations, and also how they can better find community and connect with folks, especially if they felt that they were alone for so long. Because I'm sure even in your community, there are so many people who felt isolated. There are so many people who felt like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. I really have felt isolated for so long. It is like a breath of fresh air. I feel supported. I feel safe. People need to know that they can feel safe in our spaces, but also support the work the important work that organizations like Black Nonbelievers does. And it's open to everyone. Again, if you're not going to be in the Atlanta area, please do sign up to tune in online. There will be some very, very engaging and interactive discussions. And if you are in the Atlanta area, or if you would like to travel, if you are within driving distance, come on out and join us. Atlanta is a very, very thriving area. There's a lot to do, but we hope that you will join us for our monumental event.
I love that. So you, Mandisa, if I understand you correctly, I am welcome at the cookout. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are welcome at the cookout. We want you to be there.
I love it. I love it. Well, you guys, so one more time, Mandisa, where can we go to find out more about the event and get registered, either online or to go in person?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, please visit our website at blacknonbelievers.org. We are also all over social media. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram at Be Nonbelievers Inc. We are on YouTube. Thank you for allowing us to stream this to our YouTube channel to simulcast this for our subscribers. Check out our content there as well, but definitely at our website, you can, there is a Revival of Reason tab, how to register, for those who might still be considering traveling to the group rate at the host hotel expires at midnight tonight. So you can get in there and book your room right now. There are other hotels around the area, but yes, first and foremost, subscribe. You can also become an official member of Black Nonbelievers and receive a discount to this event for both in-person and virtual attendance. And also to our other events as well. So please do, again, support the work that we're speaking of scholarships. We partner with the Secular Student Alliance on the Hurston Scholarship every year, which is named after famed freethinker Zora Neale Hurston. So we do offer a lot of community engagement, activism, community support, and definitely information about what is going on among the Black non-religious demographic, but just also overall. So, we definitely encourage people to subscribe, become an official member, attend our events. Definitely at blacknonbelievers.org is the website. That is the place to go, and that's where to start.
I love it. I love it. Hey, I can't tell you how excited I was to talk to you, Mandisa. You delivered in such a big way. I do want to honor you in this journey that you are on and the amazing work that you've done over the past 14 years. I hope that you continue to do it, going on for 14 and 14 and 14 on. And I just want to remind everybody, our guest today has been Mandisa Thomas. Please do make sure you check out Black Nonbelievers. It seemed like a great organization, multiple chapters in multiple locations, and they're doing this work. To those of you, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mandisa.
No, I was about to say, I really like to shout out our affiliate leadership team, our board, all of our members, all of our subscribers, and everyone who has joined us today from your network. Again, I appreciate you reaching out and having me on your platform. It is always an honor because I realize that, this is ongoing. And any opportunity for us to, to spread the word and have people learn more about all of our work. It's just, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, guys. Those of you over at Black Nonbelievers, we are a weird church for atheists. We do like to end all of our Wednesday services with a godless hymn. We started out with "We're Going Home." I asked my fellowship to vote on hymns. I didn't see any votes, but I know what they want to hear. So please forgive us if we are a little bit weird. Again, thank you, Mandisa, for being here.
You are so welcome.
You have a great night, okay?
Thank you.
All righty, friends. I know what they want. I heard that Jules just earlier, I believe today or last night, had a broadcast where people loved our fast becoming our favorite hymn at the Church of Korihor, our godless hymn, and that is, of course, "Lick My Cupcake." Those people who are new to us won't know about this, but "Lick My Cupcake" is a lesson that Mormons, an object lesson that Mormons use to teach especially to teach girls about chastity and sexual purity, where they have them lick a cupcake and then pass it to their neighbor, and that's supposed to represent your body, and it's very, very healthy and progressive doctrine. There's a lot of, frankly, healing, sexual healing, that spiritual healing that these godless people have been doing with one of our favorite hymns, and that is "Lick My Cupcake." Until next time, Church of Korihor. Unfortunately, we're not doing Linger Longer today because I got to feed these kids. But you know it's true every time. Flash bright, my friends.
Gum stuck to my shoe, heavy petting in the neon hue, cracked vase on the kitchen floor. I get what I want, then I want more. Soaking in the bathtub fizz, the way you look at me is a quiz. Hair teased high like a wild storm, in your arms I feel so warm. Sugar-coated invitation. Don't you know it's such a sin when you don't dig in?